All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for us to come back and enjoy. Welcome back to the Power of Yes podcast and the show that helps you step boldly into your purpose, breakthrough, and the version of yourself that you know you've been called to. So today's conversation is for anyone who is standing at the edge of a yes that feels bigger than themselves. And maybe you're facing a new opportunity, a new season, or some new responsibility, and you feel the tension between fear and possibility. My guest today knows that tension very well. In 2017, he was asked to step into a role that didn't exist and build a program that had never been done before to lead a regional initiative with no blueprint, no roadmap, no guarantees. But he said yes anyway. And so I'm excited to welcome Shaun Donovan, the executive partner of Bright Ideas, to this conversation today, and a leader working with the Economic Recovery Corps, where he supports communities with regional strategies, digital transformation, and economic revitalization across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and beyond. Shaun, welcome to the Power of Yes. I'm so glad that you said yes to this conversation today.
Well, thank you, Coach Servola. I'm glad to be here today.
Oh, well, Shaun, let's start right where everything shifted for you. Let's take us back to 2017. What was happening in your life, the work, when this unexpected opportunity first appeared before you?
Yeah, so back in 2017, I was working for the Harrisburg Regional Chamber and Capital Region Economic Development Corporation in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. At the time, my primary role was supporting our business calling program, working with some brownfield redevelopment. And I kind of this little side project where I was helping to manage our partnerships for regional economic performance program for South Central Pennsylvania, which is an 8 county initiative. And during that time, through some of my work, speaking with regional partners, I was able to come up with some funding sources. There was some talk that, our region needed to take a little bit of a step forward. We needed some more permanent leadership. So our partners came together and were able to provide some funding to create a new position. I was the director for regional workforce partnerships, was what it was called. And so I kind of wrote the program, took that to my supervisor and kind of made a pitch that, hey, I think we need to go hire somebody. We need a little bit more capacity here in this particular project that I'm working on. And, my initial thought was I would retain my role. We would go out and we would hire this new director to come in and run this program, provide us some management capacity. A couple days after I submitted the proposal with the new position description, all the funding was in place. My supervisor came back to me and said, we'd like to make a slight change. We want you to be the director of regional workforce partnerships, and then
Wow.
we'll backfill your position, which is something at the time I had not expected. That was, quite a shift in my career. And it definitely was something that, looking at it, that was a big thing to say yes to. So, but that's kind of the setting the stage. That's kind of how things started.
Wow. A lot of people listening have been in that type of a moment where you feel the pull, but you also recognize that the uncertainty is really loud. You weren't expecting to step into that. Tell me about what fears or doubt came up for you during that time.
Yeah. So me personally, some of it was just, am I going to be able to do this position? Again, it was all brand new. Not only was it a new position, but we were infusing some new ideas in there as well. It was the first initiative in Pennsylvania that brought economic development and workforce development together into the same room. That was definitely a huge part of that project. Not only would I have overseen the partnerships for regional economic performance, which I currently had, but I was also picking up oversight of all of the regional one-stop career centers into that role as well, which was a huge step, but definitely something we felt was necessary to bring the region forward. And that was kind of the conversations why we created the program to start with. We knew we needed to bring those two pieces together, and we just needed somebody to oversee and be able to manage the two pieces of that program and bring all those parts together.
That's very powerful and seeing how all those pieces are coming together. And All right. Well, that was powerful, Shaun. I'm curious to know what pushed you to ultimately say yes, even though everything about this role was untested and unclear.
Yeah. So one of the key factors, was my supervisor and the CEO of the organization I was working for at the time. Was a huge mentor of mine. And they really encouraged me, to give me that confidence to know that, you know, yes, you have the ability to take that position. We have confidence in you that you can do this. And it really you're the right person for this work. So that was kind of the key factor for me was just that encouragement from those around me and the system of the folks that I've been working with in the past.
All right. All right, Shaun, you stepped into this brand new role. You had to build a regional initiative from scratch. What did those early days look like for you?
Yeah. So really the early days for me, you know, luckily for me, because I had created the program, I at least was fairly familiar with a lot of the workings that we had already talked about. But I was still a little bit nervous. Again, it was a huge change in role for me, kind of going from being kind of the worker bee, so to speak, to being a manager. I went from not having anybody working for me to having five people directly reporting to me and being responsible for their day-to-day operations as well. So, just a lot of nervousness going around. Am I going to do a good job? What's this going to look like? Really, I hope I don't make any mistakes here. But just kind of those normal, almost like normal first day, job jitters that you have anyway. Just a little bit of a different level.
I love that, because most people, they want to wait until they have everything figured out before they lead. But you were leading while you were building and keeping things moving forward, even with all those shifts and changes that were happening all at the same time. And I'm curious, what did this experience teach you about leadership, particularly leading in uncertainty and this rapid shifting environment that you were in?
So probably the biggest thing I learned, is trusting in yourself and then
Mm.
also making sure that you have the right set of mentors around you. And definitely one of the huge keys was having regional leaders around me that had years and years of experience in their specific expertise. Yes, we were doing something new, but there were still components of things that we were pulling from stuff that we knew worked. And going back to them and listening to their stories and incorporating what they're telling you into there. And it's not just about plowing forward and trying to do this is exactly how I wrote it and this is exactly how it's going to go. But continuing that listening piece, like taking that feedback, making continual adjustments. And then and sometimes knowing that, you're going to make a mistake. Things aren't going to go 100% perfectly. You thought it was going to go straight down the middle and it took a sharp left turn and you got to figure out how to adjust with it. It's just that flexibility. As I said, like going back to, listening to folks and hearing what's going on and then just bringing that into the moment.
It's so interesting because I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, I'm a leader and things are just going to fall into place. Which even leaders need mentors. I noticed that you said that. Hey, I leaned on the mentors that were there. I leaned on their advice. I leaned on their counsel and recognizing that even when those moments came up that, hey, this may not work, or I may have to shift the way I'm thinking about this. Maybe it's just not going to work the way I thought it was going to work. And, this golden word that we've been saying a lot since COVID, pivot, make this pivot to navigate things a little bit differently. Now, Shaun, your work spans economic development, digital transformation, community revitalization. Where do you see the connection between courage and community impact?
So I think courage and community impact is one of those things where the community just sometimes needs that courage to take that first step forward. Yeah, I've seen a lot of places where they have all the pieces, everything's in place, everything's textbook, but they just need to be able to take that first step forward. And that's definitely something that I've seen in some of the work that I've been doing.
I love that. I think that a lot of times we have to be willing to allow for those things to happen, and I've seen it even in my work how it's so important for us to understand the natural progression of how things are going to flow. And there's a lot of misconceptions about the role, this work, and I'm curious to know what is one misconception that people have about economic development or regional transformation that you wish people or more people understood? Because I know about you, like in this work, you're like, oh man, I wish they knew. What's that thing for you?
Well, for me, a lot of it's I'm here to be a coach and to help you through it. I'm not necessarily here to directly do the work for you.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I will assist where I can. There's definitely times where I get in and help you lift or do writing or do whatever it is to help you get to your goal. But at the end of the day, for a lot of regional partners or organizations, I can kind of help show you the path. But at the end of the day, I need you to be able to pick it up and kind of walk with the program and again, take those steps along with me, because again, it's about creating what you need to see in your community and having that long-term impact.
You're in the Economic Recovery Corps as a fellow, and, tell us about the work that you're doing in the Economic Recovery Corps. Who are you serving? What drew you to this national effort?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So within the Economic Recovery Corps, I am working with the Region 1 Planning and Development Council in Southern West Virginia. It is a six-county regional planning commission and local development district, part of the Appalachian Regional Commission. And I'm working with communities within that six-county footprint to help give them some tools and resources to create some recovery pieces. Coming out of COVID, they didn't recover as quickly as some other areas of the country. And they're, facing some definitely challenges with the existing industry and infrastructure that's here. So my project here is to create some ideas and plans around industry diversification, primarily around the creation of tourism opportunities is one of their big opportunities they have here. There's a new national park here that was created in 2018, so that's still a very much developing industry for them. So helping them navigate that, helping them find some of the places where maybe infrastructure needs to be improved to encourage more regional tourism development. What does that regional tourism look like? What are some things that they should be looking at and revitalizing? I've also spending a lot of time working with small businesses and our downtown centers here. Again, giving them that confidence. Hey, you're going the right direction. We have components of things that are working well. Here's the next thing we need to look at. And each community has been unique and different. You know, some have a vibrant downtown and things are already going well. Some are kind of at those starting steps, and they need to know, okay, what are some of the first things that we do to kind of get our downtown to come back a little bit? And so it's working with them where they're at, meeting them where they are, providing that leadership and thought expertise, and then also connecting them to the resources that are appropriate for their next level of development.
It's so important that you talk about all those key pieces. I'm curious to know, has there been anything that has stuck out to you recently as, man, I didn't know we were going to be able to do this. This is like an awesome win, or something that has really been that you feel like, oh my goodness, this is going to be very catalytic for this community at large as these things continue to progress.
Yeah, I think there's probably been a couple things that have come to light. One is the number of folks that are actually interested in making investments in these communities. Meeting with those folks, hearing what their plans are, what their vision for the future of the communities are, and there's a lot of really good positive thoughts out there on how they can revitalize themselves and invest their money to make their town what they want it to be. And I think that's just something that's really been good for me to see. The other thing I saw, it was actually last holiday season as I was coming into this role. I was talking to some of the local downtown merchants, and they're like, we're just waiting for the city. One of these days, the city's going to get our marketing campaign going, and we're going to get all our downtown businesses. And I kind of looked at them and said, well, why can't we just step out front and we should just be promoting the street. We should be promoting downtown. We should be getting people out there. And again, they went and they actually created a whole video going up and down the street talking about every business, and then they were able to promote that in Facebook and other channels. And again, just empowering them. Like, sometimes you just need to step out there and, take your future by the horns and keep it moving in the right direction. So, but again, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing there's a lot of people that are putting in a lot of the good work here. And I think, I think there's a lot of great opportunities for this area moving forward.
I think that's so important. Even the work that I'm doing as a fellow in Fort Lauderdale, there's all these key points where you're starting to recognize that empowerment piece is so important in the work. It's just empowering people to move or take that first step or to move in the face of uncertainty, and how powerful that yes becomes as people are doing that. So for someone listening who wants to make a bigger difference in their community, but don't know where to begin, what's some of the guidance that you would give them on how to navigate that?
Well, the first thing is find out what the community is looking for. In this particular case, as I talked to the business owners on the street, as part of my initial interviews of getting to know what was going on, that's one of the things I just kept hearing over and over is, gee, I really wish people knew about us being here and what we're doing and the positive story of this street. I mean, the neighborhood I moved into, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have walked down the street because it wouldn't have been safe. And in that time, these businesses have come in, they've created this environment. There's tons of great things going on. They do joint, they're now doing joint promotions. They weren't initially, but just promoting each other on the street. And if you go to the coffee shop, you're telling people, hey, have you been to the game store? Or have you gone down to this, the cool restaurant that's down here on this end of the street, and just directing people, throughout the neighborhood. But again, it's just continually telling that positive story, helping even remind folks that live here, because again, you still hear it in the community, "Oh, I'm not going down there. It's so dangerous." It's like, that was 20 years ago. But again, now they're creating events. They're bringing people back downtown. They have a huge Halloween event, which brings all the kids in town downtown. This weekend, we're having a huge holiday parade, which actually will be televised. They televise it here.
Right.
They have so much pride in what they're bringing to the street. That they'll be able to get folks out here, and it kind of has that Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade
I love
feel
it.
in a small town. But it's really what they need. Those are the points of pride that they have in their community. And again, that's one of the things I tell people is, look for those positive things, echo them, keep telling the positive story, tell the good things that are happening in your community, and then show everybody the positives and how we can move things forward, and what you want it to look like. What's your vision for the future?
Yeah, I love that you said, "Hey, the first thing we did was listen." Because I think a lot of times when people come into places, their first thing is, I want to fix, I want to fix. But listening goes so far, especially when we're talking about revitalization and uplifting a community, is taking the time to actually hear because there's a lot of answers and that are within the community. And so I love how you were saying, hey, the first thing we did was we just wanted to get to know everybody, just wanted to learn and understand what's happening, what's going on in this region, how can we support? And the best way to do that is just by listening and then coming up with those grassroots opportunities to help people to understand, hey, it doesn't have to be this big, grandiose gesture. Sometimes the small things lead to greater impact. And all you have to do is just take those small steps to get you there. So, Shaun, many of our listeners are standing on the edge of a yes right now. They feel the pull, but the whispers of, doubt are there. And what would you say to someone who knows that they should be saying yes, but doubt has been holding them back and they're looking for that next push to get them to that next place?
Well, and again, it goes back to what I had when I was at that point. Find a trusted advisor. If there's a mentor or somebody in your life that you trust, somebody that knows you really well, go talk to them, hear what they have to say. And if it's somebody you trust and you have a good relationship with, they're going to be honest with you. And if there is actually something there that's going to hold you back, they're going to tell you about it, and they're likely also going to tell you how you can overcome that, or tell you how they're going to help support you through it. So that's really one of the things is find a support system. Find somebody that, if you don't feel like you can take that step on your own, find somebody to help you take that step with you, whoever that might be. And the other thing I'll say is, if you don't take that step, then you're not going to grow, and you're not going to gain those opportunities. And again, the step that I took has opened many, many doors for me, including being able to come here to the Economic Recovery Corps. you know that was kind of the first step, was stepping into that leadership role, and then proving to myself that I could do it. And then you know the next time a step like that comes up, you're not as hesitant to take it, because again, you're ready for it. You know what the step looks like. It's still scary. It's scary every time, but you feel more prepared. So again, sometimes it's that first step that's always the most difficult.
I love it. I love it. We say, as a parent, I used to say it takes a village to raise a child. I still say that, but as I'm listening to you, I think it's so important for us to recognize that really, if we want to be successful, then we have to learn and depend on other people as well to help build us as we're going forward into our careers, into our work, no matter what it is, making sure that you've got that network of people, that community, that tribe that are there to help you to move from one place to the next. Shaun, I want to thank you for showing us what courageous leadership looks like, not when everything is certain, but when there's no guarantees. And your yes didn't just impact your career, but it shaped communities, collaboration, and the people that you now serve through Bright Ideas Consulting and the Economic Recovery Corps. So, family, if you want to connect with Shaun and learn more about his work or explore what Bright Ideas Consulting has to offer, I want you to go ahead and scan our QR code for Shaun. That's right up here in the corner over here. And make sure that you are connecting with Shaun. Why? Because this work is important. And I believe that Shaun's work is phenomenal and the region that he's supporting. But even this work, bringing this to your area is even powerful. So if you're someone who's listened to our time together today, has been like, hey, I would love to take this to the next step. I've got some things that I've some roadblocks that I gotta navigate through. Go ahead and click on that QR code and get in touch with Shaun and learn more about his work and see how you can connect. So, if you're standing on the edge of your yes, don't forget to check out our Yes Challenge, Yes Confidence Journal to help you to move from hesitation to bold action. Shaun, I want to thank you so much for your voice, your leadership, and most importantly, your yes today. All right, everyone, as we get ready to close out our time together, say yes to your purpose, yes to your growth, and yes to the next chapter that is waiting for you. I'll see you on the next episode of The Power of Yes.